Hello, this is Rudy Giuliani, and I'm back with Rudy's Common Sense. Today, we're going to analyze the G7, as well as the meeting between President Biden and President Putin. It's a critical first indication of how the new president will represent us abroad. This was Biden's first trip abroad. It was a consequential one, meeting with one of our two major adversaries in the world. And it gives a great deal of knowledge now and information and develops a great deal of views on where America is going, much more so than just the general comments that were made, because now they've been put into the active machine of international negotiations and diplomacy, and the world was able to see much of this. Not all of it. It wasn't really transparent, but they can draw their own conclusions. They're not limited to what they read in what is now in America not a free press any longer, but a government-dominated, virtually news organization of the Democrat Party. He began his first talk with his obsession with President Trump. Here he is in a foreign country for the first time. He's got his note card with him. In fact, he was silly enough to hold it out so that a camera got the first 10 lines of the note card for his first speech. It begins with basically attack Trump and the Republican Party. That's his introduction to European foreign policy is Donald Trump was a terrible president. The Republican Party is made up of insane people who stormed the Capitol, but they don't make up a majority of Americans. And I'm here to fix everything. Rather unusual, inappropriate, not particularly productive to attack your opponent of 7 or 8 months ago in front of an audience where you're dealing with foreign relations, not domestic politics. It also kind of shows your insecurity. Which is the way adults would view it. But that wasn't it. I mean, during that particular opening statement, he got very confused about whether he had introduced his staff or not, and said they'd be very angry at him if he didn't do it. In fact, about 4 times during the thing, this new thing came out where if he didn't do something, his staff would be angry at him, which really leads to the conclusion that many of us had for some time that somebody's running the White House other than him. It's getting him frightened. So the entire 3 days, I mean, it was like you'd find out what they were talking about, which wasn't much, and then there'd be the blooper reels, or the thing they play in baseball stadiums where the flubbed plays. Biden did reject the Trump America First agenda and embraced very, very warmly a European progressive multilateral decision-making agenda, which pretty much he's comfortable with, the sort of Obama leading from behind, which isn't leading, it's following. That's always been a very unanalyzed statement from a sycophant press when Biden would say, he led from behind. Well, you follow the person in front. You don't follow the person behind. Person behind is following. It's time to take a short break. Your credit card company found suspicious charges on your card. That's simple identity theft. It's annoying, but they cover it. The type of fraud you really need to worry about is home title theft, a devastating crime that takes you off your home's title. And you're not covered by insurance or most identity theft programs. That's why you need Home Title Lock. Here's how easy it is for cyber criminals to get you. The title documents to our homes are kept online. The thief forges your signature on a quitclaim deed stating you just sold your home, and he's the new owner. Then he borrows money using your home's equity and leaves you in debt. You won't know until late payment or eviction notices arrive. The instant Home Title Lock detects someone tampering with your home's title, they help shut it down. Let's get you protected. Go to HometitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim. And enter Rudy for 30 free days of protection. That's promo code Rudy at HomeTitleLock.com. Thank you for returning to our analysis. And then they issued a 25-page paper on China that some of the fake news listed as, breakthroughs with China. It was a single breakthrough in it. It was a watered-down document, which, if reviewed by tough, hard-nosed Chinese diplomats, they will say, what a bunch of sissies. But in the Chinese statement, if you read it, I think it's 25 pages, it does mention China's activities in the East and South China Seas, which of course could cause a war. But it doesn't mention that what it's about. It's about militarization. It's about militarizing seas that are right next to, right near Japan, and Japan also claims in other countries. And they're making it a military installation. That's not mentioned. It's just the activities, which says to China, they're not really serious. They're euphemistic. Euphemism is usually the sign of, I'm not going to really penalize you for this. But they've been doing it for years, and Biden gave this one away when he went to China and his son got the $1.5 billion investment from the Bank of China. That was way back in 2015. Joe goes there, tries to do away with the militarization, as he always does, as Gates said. He failed in foreign policy, and the family came out really well with $1.5 billion. Then it mentions Hong Kong. We've all read about the terrible things China is doing in Hong Kong. The report doesn't say that. It just mentions Hong Kong. It doesn't point out that it's a violation of the agreement and that they're virtually making Hong Kong into a dictatorship. I mean, they're removing self-government, which was promised to Hong Kong. But euphemism, again, and appeasement has us not know what's going on there. Okay, we're going to fix it. What is it? Well, it's murder, torture, 3 million people in concentration camps. And many of the human rights groups believe it's genocide. It mentions Taiwan. It doesn't point out that over the last several months, there have been hundreds of planes, sorties, in and around Taiwan to threaten them. Hundreds. 25 in one day just recently to get us ready, to kind of pound us for the G7. I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't done as a surprise to see whether we had the courage to bring it up. No, we didn't. We just said we're going to work on fixing things with Taiwan, and then the most ridiculous of all on economics and trade, where China has stolen millions of jobs from the United States and continues to do it until Trump came along and changed it, and now they've all reversed it. You know what we're going to do about that? Perfect, Obama, Biden. We're going to continue to consult. Why do you have to have a summit and spend all that money to go there and say, we're going to continue to consult, which is all they did. They're also going to consult. They're also going to consult on, several other areas, like they're going to consult on cybersecurity. Consult. They're hacking us. What do we consult about? And then on the Chinese Communist Party virus, COVID, CCP virus, maybe the most ridiculous thing of all that indicates how weak-minded and weak the leadership of Europe is, which we've now joined, maybe even weaker. We agreed that we're going to find out if that COVID that was sent all around Europe and killed millions of people, whether it came from the laboratory. We're going to find out. We're going to appoint the World Health Organization to do it. China controls the World Health Organization. You might as well have China do it. The World Health Organization already did a review. One of the guys running it is one of the guys that's responsible, number one, for these dastardly scientific gain of function research, And number two is covering his backside, because if it's true, he's going to get sued and get bankrupt and probably go to jail for all the lying that he did. That's who they appoint to do the review. And they find, oh, didn't come from the laboratory. Will the laboratory give you anything to analyze? No. Trying to turn over any papers? No. Trying to show you any slides? Or no. But it did not come from the laboratory. It came from the wet market. And we, weak-minded Biden and appeaser Tony Blinken, agreed to have the organization that was involved in covering this up from the very beginning for China now give us an independent report on where it came from. Whew. This couldn't be worse. This got to be the worst nightmare of the people that feared that Biden would not be strong enough to stop the leftward socialist communist movement of the United States, and that he was cognitively impaired. I, for one, didn't think it was as bad. I can't imagine Blinken or Biden agreeing to have the World Health Organization, who should be investigated for being involved in the spreading of murder around the world. Let them do the test, and we'll be satisfied. I mean, this is an example of why you cannot ally yourself constantly to multilateralism, because it tamps down to the lowest common denominator any of your positions. I mean, there were a few positions where America wanted to be stronger, but to satisfy Macron and the others, we watered them down. Nowhere in that document is any assertion that China allegedly is responsible for the spreading of COVID-19, the CCP virus. Of course they did. We all know it. We know they put Chinese people on airplanes, sent them around the world, while they isolated people in China to make sure it didn't get worse in China. And that's how it spread to Italy, to France, to Germany, to the United States of America, to Africa, to Asia. China spread it. And China opposed any attempt of any country to close down trade with China at the time. And when President Trump was the first to do it, he was condemned for doing it as a racist and a xenophobe by none other than Joe the Appeaser. Well, the Committee of Appeasers found a willing ally in Joe Biden. I can't tell who wants to appease more. Biden certainly sent that signal before he came there, because he gave away the summit before he entered it. Generally, if you're going to go to a summit and you know a country wants something, you hold on to it. Either you're not going to give it to them because it's terrible, or you're going to give it to them, but you want something big in return. Well, nobody taught Joe that about negotiating. So 2 weeks before the summit, he gave Russia the biggest thing they wanted, which is permission to go forward with the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. He removed the waivers that Trump had put on it that held it up. He did it over the opposition of a unanimous Republican view and a very, very strong Democratic view, including his Secretary of State, who had said days before that they were going to do nothing with that. And of course, he got nothing in return. It was granted to Putin without getting anything in return. It's like selling your house for nothing, for goodwill, so that the neighbor there will always like you. Probably not a good idea. How to make China laugh? They had to laugh. They're going to have. They might as well appoint the Chinese police to do the review. They're free and clear on that one. It's their co-conspirators who are going to do the review. And during the session itself, it was one thing after another. Biden let it off immediately making himself a laughingstock. Boris Johnson introduced the people there. He clearly introduced the president of South Africa moments before. Biden, I guess, who was not the chairing it, but sitting next to Johnson and wanted to make it apparent that he was there and important, because he does make mistakes like this all the time. Because remember, before he had this dementia problem, he was the dumbest man in the Senate who was left back in the third grade. So we're dealing with a basic, not too smart guy. Boris Johnson introduces the president of South Africa, then somebody else, then somebody else. And the president of the United States interrupts and says, "You didn't introduce the president of South Africa." Johnson, I guess, taken aback for a moment, says, "Well, the president of South Africa," and then turns to him and says, "I already introduced him." To which Biden says, "Oh, I guess you did." And the whole place breaks out in laughter.
President Ramaphosa, President Moon, he just committed.
And the president of South Africa.
And the president of South Africa, as I said earlier.
Oh, you did?
I certainly did.
Well, you get to mention twice. So.
I'll go over that again. Let me tell you, we're delighted. Mr. President, I'm glad to say we're joined by Prime Minister Modi of India, who's on.
Now, that's a very embarrassing thing to watch as an American. They're not laughing with him. They're laughing at the President of the United States. They're laughing at the fact that he can't retain things. If it happened once, yeah. But it can happen over and over and over and over again. During a recess, he gets lost, and there's a film of him wandering through aimlessly. It looks like a lounge or a small restaurant, and a reporter yells out at him, "How is your meeting going in Cornwall, Mr. President?" Biden seemed very confused and was rescued by his wife, who was over on the side, who yells out at him, "Joe, come on!" And he aimlessly walks on. She grabs his arm, and then she directs him out of the place.
How are your meetings going in Cornwall, Mr. President?
I beg your pardon?
How are your meetings going here in Cornwall?
Very well.
Come on.
Really nice to meet you. They always do.
The next day, I don't know which was the worst day. He really decomposed. He was giving a talk at a Sunday press conference. He kept confusing Libya with Syria. He had us trying to work with Russia, where they have a very, very big role in Syria with Assad, but he kept calling it Libya. That was 3 times. I don't know. I couldn't tell. I mean, if it was once, it would just be a slip. You know, sometimes you say North Korea and you mean South Korea, or South Korea, you mean, you said, well, I meant North Korea. But this went on for a whole explanation. And by the way, the rest of the words in it were, well, I don't know what he's talking about.
Where we could work together with Russia. For example, in Libya, we should be opening up the passes to be able to go through and provide food assistance and vital assistance to a population that's in real trouble. I think I'm going to try very much hard to. It is. And by the way, there's places where I shouldn't be starting off and negotiating in public here, but let me say it this way. Russia has engaged in activities which we believe are contrary to international norms, but they have also bitten off some real problems they're going to have trouble chewing on. And for example, the rebuilding of Syria, of Libya, they're there. And as long as they're there without the ability to bring about some order in the region, and you can't do that very well without providing for the basic economic needs of people. So I'm hopeful that we can find an accommodation that where we can save the lives of people in, for example, in Libya,
This would be a good time to take a short break. I accomplished a lot in 2020 exposing the truth, establishing the relationship with you, working tirelessly for America. And I came to know the work and value of the people at American Hartford Gold. You see, you buy gold not only for what you know, but you buy gold for what you don't know. American Hartford Gold is the company you can trust when it comes to buying gold. They sell physical gold and silver delivered right to your door or inside of your IRA. In the precious metals industry, they are the highest rated firm in our country with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau and thousands of satisfied clients. Give them a call and tell them Rudy sent you. And be sure to ask them what I bought. And if you call them right now, they will give you up to $1,500 of free silver on your first order. Folks, these are uncertain times. The one thing you can count on to protect what you have worked so hard for is physical gold and silver. So don't wait. Call them now. Call 833-GOLD-777. That's 833-GOLD-777. Or text Rudy to 65532. Again, that's 833-GOLD-777. Or text Rudy to 65532. Welcome back to Rudy's Common Sense, and today we're looking at Biden's first attempt overseas to represent the United States at the G7 and then at the summit with Vladimir Putin. And it was quite a spectacle and quite an embarrassing period of time for the United States, and a heck of an indication to the world that we don't have leadership. He then shows up at another conference, and he's explaining. He's explaining, trying to explain in an answer why he had not lifted Trump's sanctions. They say, you want to be very different than Trump. You want a different world, new world, but you still have those sanctions. Well, he comes back to the microphone, and this is you got to see this. And the strangest little voice says, "120 days, give me a break. I need them." No, I'm sorry. 120 days, give me a break. I need time.
Thank you. I'm going to get in trouble with my staff. Yeah, go ahead, but I pretend that you didn't answer you.
Thank you very much, sir. You have often said repeatedly that America is back.
Yes.
At the same time, you've kept in place some Trump-era steel and aluminum sanctions. And I wanted to ask you, when you're having these conversations with European allies who are very concerned about these sanctions, how do you justify that? And what are your plans to change?
120 days. Give me a break. Need time.
And then he sort of slides away. He's been in office 145 days. It's not so bad, though. He once said he was in the Senate for 150 years. And he also said that he saw Roosevelt on television reading the comics. First of all, it was LaGuardia who read comics, not Roosevelt. And there was no television. Roosevelt died 5 years before they had television. And it might not have been the comics. It might have been the fireside chats, which also were done before there was television. I try to find explanation for him. He may have seen him in the newsreels. But there are so many. There's so many. It's obvious what's wrong with him. They got to be stupid if you don't know what's wrong with him. They got to be. You know what they say in Italian? If you're stupid, stunad. You got to be stunad. Like your brain doesn't work, like his doesn't. during the same session, he says, when he gets ready to call reporters, I guess he's going to call the wrong one or something, he said, "I'm sorry. I'm going to get in trouble with staff if I don't do this the right way." And then he calls on the reporter from Bloomberg, who he was assigned to call. And at other times during it, it is obvious now, and he actually has said it, that they give him a list of the reporters that are going to be asked questions. Every once in a while, they put in a reporter. Most of the time, they're people that are working for the Democratic National Committee indirectly by working for NBC, CBS, ABC, very often CNN, MSNBC. This was a Bloomberg reporter in this particular case, not very different. These are all arms of the now politically dominated press. So therefore, I wouldn't doubt that he gets the questions in advance. He seems to have the answers written out, so we must have a pretty good idea what the questions are. And then he proceeds to read them. And then every once in a while, he tries to go extemporaneous, and his illness becomes apparent. Maybe one of the worst on that particular day is he's trying to explain COVAX. COVAX is a program that we worked out. Don't know if it started with Trump and then he concluded it, or it's his, or COVAX, COVAX. The program is for the distribution of vaccines throughout the world, particularly so that poorer nations can get it. So the richer nations, which would include the G7, are participating in a program to do that. Fine thing to do. I'm pretty sure it started under Trump and Biden's continuing it. No problem with that. Except in trying to explain it, he describes it as the COVID program. And then he says everybody knows what COVID is. And then he defines it as COVAX. This one is really impossible to understand how he confused the two. Libya and Syria were tough too, since he did it 3 times. But if he had any kind of substantial role in putting together the COVAX program, which he should have, because I know early on Trump had a very big role in trying to figure this out, he wouldn't confuse. He wouldn't. That was a program to give out chemotherapy for people who have lung cancer. You wouldn't confuse it with the disease. Well, European and Australian reporters were completely shocked. Some of the response was muted by the left-wing media, but some was really quite harsh. Australian reporter basically said he was ready for a nursing home, and how could they send him? Look, most of these people nowadays have experience with someone, a relative or a friend, that has some form of dementia or Alzheimer's. So these symbols are no longer the symbols of, oh, he's an old man. Yeah, he's an old man, but so are a lot of people, and they don't talk like that. They don't act like that. They don't consistently, they may get 1 or 2 things wrong, the way everybody does. So do young people. But this is very unusual, peculiar behavior. This is not the behavior of a normal 78, 79, 80-year-old. And then it didn't get any better. During the meeting with Putin, when he walks in and they sit down, I mean, just the way they're sitting there is quite an embarrassment. One looks like the student, and the other looks like the guy in charge. He looks a bit like a mafia don or Russian organized crime don, the way he's sitting there totally confident. He's there fidgeting with his notes, his cheat sheets. I've never seen a president do this. They wrote out what he was going to say to Putin. What do you think? I go into a meeting like that, and the guy walks in, and he's got notes to talk to me. I come to a conclusion about the guy, right? I say, gee, this guy's not too smart, huh? Something wrong here. He's got to have notes on something like this. I mean, he should be living and breathing this. Let's take a break. I've been sleeping on MyPillows for some time. I love them. They're simply the very best pillows ever made. But I just found out that they also have a wide assortment of other incredible products, like their mattress toppers, sheets, towels, and slippers. and more. Listeners have helped build MyPillow into the incredible company it is today, and Mike Lindell wants to give back to all of you. Pick some pillows or pick several of the other great products, and you can get super discounts on MyPillow products by going to MyPillow.com, promo code Rudy, or call 1-800-725-7759, promo code Rudy right now, and see each of the specially priced items, including those in the radio listener special square. You're going to see rotational offers up to 66% off on products like the pillows, mattress topper, and geyser sheets, but also new products like their slippers, weighted blankets, robes, and waffle blankets. All MyPillow products come with a 60-day money-back guarantee. Enter promo code Rudy for these new great specials. That's MyPillow.com, promo code Rudy. Welcome back, and let's get to the actual meeting itself between Putin and Biden. I mean, it begins normally. They shake hands, they go in. The posture on the couch looks like Joe is fidgeting and looking at his cheat sheets, and Putin's just sitting there looking confident and sometimes bored, looking like a mafia guy, actually, or Russian organized crime guy, I guess would be better. And these incoherent statements just kept coming and going. And I mean, like for example, the day before the conference, which we really should talk about before we talk about the conference itself, he was asked about his calling Putin a killer, which of course could create very difficult problem for him in explaining it. Well, he doesn't explain it.
To answer the first question, I'm laughing too. Well, look, I mean, he has made clear that the answer is, I believe he has in the past essentially acknowledged that he was, there are certain things that he would do or did.
I mean, you look at something like that on television at night from a world leader, and you say to yourself, as a matter of common sense, there's something wrong with him. First, he's asked about calling Putin a killer, and he does a Kamala Harris laugh. Then he gives an answer that actually, he has made it clear that, then 7 seconds of silence. And then the answer is, I believe he has in the past essentially acknowledged that there were certain things he would do or did do. But look, when I was first asked that question on air, I answered it honestly, but I don't think it matters a whole lot. The fact that you think he's a killer doesn't matter a whole lot? Whew. Doesn't matter a whole lot. Well, a lot of this is his own demented view of the world, his naive view of the world, which is typical of a lot of Democrats. There was one statement he made that is very, very illustrative of this very dangerous, naive approach to the world that all these progressives have, whether it's him or Obama or Harris, if she has a view at all. This is what he says. This is a quote from I believe it's the press conference before the meeting with Putin. I'm hoping that President Putin concludes there is some interest in terms of his own interest in changing the perception of the world has of him, in terms of whether or not he will engage in behavior that's more consistent with what is considered to be appropriate behavior for a head of state. Putin he doesn't give a damn what people think of him. Putin doesn't care if you think his actions are appropriate or not. He's only been around forever. When he went into Ukraine, he didn't care what people thought. When we said he's ruining his reputation in the world, he just laughed at us. When has Putin ever been moved by how people perceive him in the world? Maybe if you can get him on how he's perceived in Russia, and whether he's keeping people under control properly. That might get to him, Joe, if you had a brain and you could figure it out. That is really stupid. That is totally misperceiving your adversary. You know how dangerous that is? And you're the president of the United States. How do we do this? World opinion is going to change Putin. And then, just to top it off, he's asked whether he would agree to have Ukraine in NATO, where they belong, by the way. And he said, he gave the big, long, ridiculously convoluted answer. The end result being there's too much corruption in Ukraine. Joe, how much money did your family get from Ukraine? I don't know, was it 5 million, 6, 7, 8? People think it's 10, 12. They even think they're offshore bank accounts, but we don't need the offshore bank accounts. We got the accounts. I count 5, 6 million to your son for a no-show job. Too corrupt to be in NATO, but they're not too corrupt to give your son $5 million. I mean, and who gave $5 million to your son? One of the most corrupt oligarchs, Russian-oriented oligarch. And what did you do? You got the prosecutor fired, didn't you? And the prosecutor dropped the case against your son, right? But he dropped the case against the billionaire too, huh? Billionaire got to keep $5 billion. You think, Joe, you think we really believe that money was for Hunter? You must really think that I'm stupid, like the liberal press that you talk to. You know what the people of Ukraine used to do when you would talk to them about corruption? They'd laugh at you, Joe. They'd laugh at you because you were as corrupt as they were. Not all of them, but they had slimy, creepy politicians like a bunch of the Democrats you hang around with that also were using Ukraine as a cash cow, which is why they're protecting you. And you have the gall to say you're not going to let them in NATO because they're corrupt, and you help corrupt them? Well, the meeting with Putin was anticlimactic. I mean, they sat there for 3 hours. Joe had his cheat sheets. Putin didn't need them because Putin is of sound mind. He walked in as an appeaser. He had already given away the one piece of leverage that he had, which was the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. During the conference, he was consistently checking with his notes, moving around, taking his glasses off, taking his glasses on, doing all kinds of things. We don't know what happened because we weren't allowed to see it, hear it, even afterwards. He later said, when he had his Seoul press conference, they almost always have joint press conferences, but I think they were deathly afraid of having Biden out there with Putin. Putin could have kept him there for 2 hours, and you see what would happen, right? He'd get Libya and Syria confused. He wouldn't know where he was for a bit of time. He'd start talking about corruption in Ukraine, not realizing that he's guilty of more corruption in Ukraine than anyone I know of in America. During the meeting, according to what was said later, Biden basically warned Putin about two things, where there would be devastating consequences for Russia. One was if Alexei Navalny, who is a big opponent of Putin and sort of a real problem for Putin, and if there was a cyber attack, again, there would be devastating consequences for Russia. Now, just how seriously do you think Putin would take this? Navalny has already been poisoned, unjustly imprisoned, and the response of the United States and Joe Biden has been, so when he says if he dies, it's gonna be devastating. I don't know. Sounds like a hollow threat to me when you didn't do anything when he was in prison, and you didn't do anything when he was poisoned and almost killed. Want a better example? It's going to be devastating if there's another cybersecurity attack. He just attacked us. He attacked our biggest pipeline. He put it out of commission. or it happened from his country. What'd you do about it, Joe? You gave him the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. You think this man, veteran of the KGB, you think he's going to worry about you? Hey, he's not corn pop, you know. And this isn't a fiction where you're the big hero. And then he says, I outlined for Putin 16 targets of hacking that are too sensitive, or I'm going to do it. And we will agree you can't hack there. Okay, take him away. Take him away. First of all, you just indicated to him the 16 things that would do most damage to your country. You just did that with a guy you called a killer, a KGB killer, a guy who has no morals, according to you, a guy you looked in his eyes, he didn't see any soul. You just told him the best targets to hit in America. And the second thing you told him is that the 17th target's okay, and the 18th, and the 19th, and the 20th. You realize how stupid that is? Do you realize how dangerous that is for us? I had a list for years of the most dangerous targets, the most frequently talked about targets of Islamic terrorism in New York. The priority list. It helped us a lot on September 11th to go look and secure the other places that might be attacked after the World Trade Center. I never thought of giving it to Osama bin Laden. I never wanted Osama bin Laden to see what we thought might be the worst thing you could attack in New York City. In the solo press conferences that followed, in order to avoid Biden breaking down next to Putin, the guy wasn't in control of himself. He was outdoors. He was obviously uncomfortable with the heat. He was taking his jacket on and off, on and off, on and off. I read the transcript and I listened to the thing. I don't understand it, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. If you want to listen to it and send me at rudyscommonsense.com an analysis of what he said, I would appreciate it. I couldn't figure out what the heck he said. Here's what I know. They had a press conference. They had a meeting. We had a meeting with one of our 2 or 3 biggest adversaries in the world. You made the major concession to him before. You gave him the pipeline. And you got him to do nothing. He did nothing. He came out and he did his press conference first. And I did read his. His read like a novel. Well written, well thought out. Guy is evil. The guy's a killer, but the guy's smart as hell. You're not. He didn't make a single concession. He said about Navalny, the guy that you want him to not kill, he laid out a whole prosecutorial case against Navalny and his group being a group that does riots and civil disturbance, and then used it to attack you for letting Black Lives Matter run rampant. For all the riots that happened last year where you and your running mate paid for the bail of the people who were destroying property. He attacked you, Joe. And the fact that you were too cowardly to be there in a joint press conference meant you couldn't defend yourself or the United States. He really hit you good on the Black Lives Matter and all the violence and then all the violence that's increased since you came into office. And he said, I'm sorry, this is a dangerous group. They want to do the kinds of things in America that you let these other groups. He mentioned Black Lives Matter. He didn't mention Antifa. He sort of suggested that. Then he talked about all the civil disturbance and all the massive increase in crime going on right now. He said, we don't want to be like you. Thank you. But, therefore he avoided the Navalny question. He didn't say that he wasn't going to do another attack, cyber attack. He said we're going to consult on it. He didn't make a single concession except to have further meetings and conferences. And then you come out You weren't there to defend us against these charges about how our country is out of control. But you didn't bother to do it, even though you listened to his press conference. Maybe you don't have the guts to do it, Joe, or the intellectual acuity, or what is it? Why didn't you defend us? Oh, because we're systemically racist. I forgot. Maybe you didn't defend us because you think we're a bad country. But, I mean, that performance, you watch it for yourself and jacket on, off, jacket on, off, jacket on, off. Much of his statements are wandering, confusing. He couldn't list a single thing that he got as a concession. He gave no explanation of why he did what he did with the Nord Stream 2 pipeline before an opportunity to use it in a negotiation. He gave no explanation why he negotiated against himself in the United States. And I went through it very, very carefully, as hard as I could. I told you I don't understand it. But there's no indication that he got anything, except previously, before he did his press conference, basically Biden punched him in the United States in the nose several times and knocked him down. And he did nothing to defend us, much like your very incompetent Secretary of State Blinken did when he was meeting with Putin's number 2 and number 3 guys, and they beat the living daylights out of him, and he just was smiling, basically, just euphemistic statements. You guys don't know how to protect us. You don't know how to defend us. Then we get to the end of the press conference that nobody could understand, nor could they figure out why we even had this summit, except for you to prove to the world that you're cognitively impaired, and you already gave them the thing they wanted. We didn't have to have a big ceremony about it. Caitlin Collins of CNN, who's basically been I'm not going to say the bad word. Basically, just covers him, not like a reporter. Just, Biden is so wonderful. He's so wonderful. She finally acted like a reporter as he was walking out because she had listened to Putin. And everything he said, Putin said, I'm not going to do, or I'm going to study it. She said, why are you so confident that Putin will change his behavior? And then she points out the things that Putin said, She never mentioned Navalny. He attacked Navalny's group. He never said anything about not doing any hacks. He never said anything about cooperating with you on any kind of realistic way with regard to Iran. So she says to him, why are you so confident that Putin will change his behavior? Never has before, right? That's a legit question. Well, I'm not going to repeat it. You watch it. You tell me he didn't lose it.
Why are you so confident he'll change his behavior, Mr. President?
Yeah, I'm not confident in changing behavior. What do you do all the time? So when did I say I was confident?
You said in the next 6 months you'll be able to determine.
What I said was, let's get it straight. I said what will change their behavior is if the rest of the world reacts to them and it diminishes their standing in the world. I'm not confident of anything. I'm just stating the fact.
But given his past behavior has not changed, and in that press conference after sitting down with you for several hours, he denied any involvement in cyber attacks. He downplayed human rights abuses. He even refused to say Alexei Navalny's name. So how does that account to a constructive meeting as President Putin framed?
You don't understand that, you're in the wrong business.
And that is a sign of dementia from the DSM-5. Losing your temper unexplainably and quickly. How often does Biden do that? All the symptoms are there, ladies and gentlemen. Just a question of whether we got the guts to admit it. Well, after that, somewhere when he gets to the tarmac, he approaches Caitlin and a group of reporters and he apologizes for being intemperate. But then he goes on with a whole another explanation of why the press is so negative. Now, this guy must live in another world. I mean, he's covered like he's the Messiah. I mean, they lie about him. They cover up his dementia. They cover up his 30 years of crime. They cover up his son making false statements to get a .38 revolver, saying he's not a drug addict. They cover up all the money his son laundered when there's a document as simple as one page that points out a transaction between Ukraine, Latvia, and Cyprus. They cover up everything for you, Joe. This is negative? Why are you so confident he's going to do it now when he just came out and basically made no commitments? That's a legit question, Joe. You'd probably lose it because you know how much of a failure you are, huh? You know. In here, you know. Gates was right. You've never succeeded in a foreign policy mission at all. The ones that were good for you was when you were point man and you failed and the family got millions. You know, like in Iraq and in China and in Russia and in, of course, Ukraine. A couple others too, Joe, right? I mean, I haven't seen everything. Maybe Romania, but you know it. You know what a big thief you are. Fortunately, the American people are stuck with you. You're not just a thief. You don't know what you're doing. End result, 2 press conferences at the end. One man is whatever he is, evil, terrible, killer, KGB. He gives a very cogent, concise explanation of his position. He very deftly makes no concessions at all that Biden was asking for. He comes away with the pipeline that's going to make his country even richer and be able to extort Europe even more. And then he has the wonderful experience for a guy like that of just beating the daylights out of the United States for being a country with a lot of violence, a lot of discrimination, a lot of hatred, with organizations that destroy businesses for poor people. And he says, I don't want my country to become like yours, and I'm not going to be as easy on these revolutionary homicidal groups that you are, like Black Lives Matter and some of the others. He does that, and then our president comes out, and the whole world that isn't biased, prejudiced, or paid off says, America's unrepresented. We're virtually unrepresented in this conference. He didn't defend us against the charges that Putin made. He couldn't point to a single thing that he got. And then he displayed big time before the entire world that he's suffering from a disease that many people in the world can diagnose themselves because they've seen it in their fathers, their mothers, their brothers, their uncles, their relatives. And not only have I seen it, but I've consulted with doctors and read the DSM-5. And how long are we going to let this go on? How long are we going to let this impaired man do this to us? This was an important conference. The last time we blew a conference like this, it led to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Don't know if the situation is the same, and I don't know if Putin is Khrushchev. I can sure tell you Biden is not Kennedy. So let's keep track of this. Let's keep watching it as we watch also how these people are taking away our rights. And we're getting ready to put together our Freedom Network and our Save America movement, which in subsequent weeks we're going to talk to you more about, because we have got to organize, because we have got to win in 2022 and in 2024 to save our country and to save our way of life. Thank you very much, and God bless America.